All right. Good morning, everyone. We got a full house today, full table. I'd like to welcome everyone to the March 1st Transportation Committee meeting and call the meeting to order. As a reminder, this meeting is shared virtual through Zoom for those who couldn't join us today and is being recorded. Committee members, please remember to turn in your microphones before speaking so that those in the room and online can hear you. And then a little housekeeping thing, if you hadn't already, when you walk out, if you can sign in the sign-in card out in the hallway, that'd be appreciated. So I'd like to go around the room and have everyone introduce themselves. I can start. Kevin Carrier, representing Lake County.
Good morning, Tara Orban, representing Cook County.
Amy Lee, CMAP.
Audrey Wennick, Metropolitan Planning Council.
Megan Swanson, IDOT, OPNP.
Jack Cruikshank, IEPA.
Heidi Lichtenberger, representing Kendall County.
Morning, Jackie Forbes, Kane County.
Drew Duffin, McHenry County.
Christina Kapkowski, Will County.
John Loper, DuPage County.
Tom Vanderwood, Northwest Indiana Regional Planning Commission.
Jeff Shriver, Chicago DOT. Eric Llewellyn, Pace.
Todd Schmidt, Federal Highway Administration.
Ryan Hole, Southeastern Wisconsin, RPC.
Good morning, Leon Rockingham, Mayor of the City of North Chicago, Council of Mayors.
Kyle Whitehead, RTA.
Jennifer Henry, CTA.
Henry Geraro, Illinois Tollway.
Lynette Severola, Metra.
Steve Schulke, IDOT Region 1.
Chuck Abraham, IDOT YPI.
Doug Ferguson, CMAP staff.
Terry Dixon, CMAP.
Evan Hayes, CMAP.
George Ganethil King, Kansas Council of Mayors.
Ryan Larson, North Shore Council of Mayors.
Matt Pasquini, DuPage Mayors Managers Conference.
Mike Clemens, Lake County Council of Mayors.
Joe Serdam, Lake County Council of Mayors.
Zubair Heather, Baxter Woodman.
Chad Riddle, IDOT.
Russell Petroviak, CMAP staff.
John Carpenter, CMAP staff.
Laura Wilkeson, CMAP. Cam Adab, CMAP.
Jenny Vanna, CMAP.
Nora Beck, CMAP.
Martin Menninger, CMAP.
Richard Norwood, CMAP.
Jojo, CMAP.
Ryan Tomto, CMAP.
Lindsay Bailey, CMAP.
Blanca Bella Schneider, CMAP.
All right. Thank you. And Cameron, do we have anyone online?
Yes. Let's see. Alex Ensign, Bill Barnes, Clark Shoop Diggs, Daniel M., Daniel Thomas, David Kralik, Don Dina, Dean Mentes, Elizabeth Scott, Heather Mullins, Jamie Jackson, Jane Grover, Jeffrey Yoshihara, Jill Ziegler, Julie Reschke, Kasha Hart, Katie Hurtis, Leslie Rauer, Mark Kane, Melissa Meyer, Michael Vanderhoff, Mike Sobczak, Ryan Elke, Ryan Gugitz, Scott Hennings. That's it.
All right, great. Moving on to item 2, agenda changes and announcements. Just one quick announcement is I was informed this is Bob Dean's last day today at CMAP Transportation Committee. Is that?
Yeah, that's right.
Rumors correct? All right.
Yes.
So thank you for all your time serving here. I think it's been a couple of years on the Transportation Committee.
And then CMAP.
Right. Yeah. I wish you the best in whatever you're doing.
Thank you.
And then Tara's got one quick announcement.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Tara Orban from Cook County. Just wanted to make a quick announcement that the call for projects for Invest in Cook is open for our 8th round. Applications are due March 22nd for Cook County communities. So please keep that in mind. Thank you.
Great. Any other announcements from the committee members? Yeah, Kyle.
I imagine CMAP, I touch on this, but I'll just mention too, the community planning call for projects is now open, where we partner with CMAP, and our work is focused on, at the RTA, is focused on supporting TOD and transit corridor planning. We do have a new category within the community planning program for transit station activation projects. This is an initiative that was discussed at our Public Transit Safety Summit earlier in the week. We're looking to support community-based organizations all around the region who want to make transit stations and stops more safe and welcoming. So it's a new category. There's just about a month turnaround with the application process. So we are eagerly trying to get the word out and make people aware of this opportunity. So if anyone here has any questions or can help spread the word, please let me know.
Great. Thank you, Kyle. Yes, yeah, go ahead.
Just want to note that the Illinois EPA is going to have electric vehicle funding available, and kind of talking about what Kyle said, one of the scoring metrics will likely be whether or not the location is at a transit park and ride facility. We think that that's a very good model where you go park and then take the train. That will be open to municipalities. We anticipate it within the next month, around $45 million statewide. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jack. Any other announcements? All right, moving on to item 2.01, request for agenda changes. Haven't heard of any agenda changes. Do we have any requests from members? Nothing? All right, item 2.02, CMAP updates. Amy's with us and we'll provide an update on CMAP agency and board updates.
All right, good morning. This is our first TC meeting of 2024, so Happy New Year. It's already March. We do have a full agenda today, so I'm going to try to keep the updates light. I just want to do a quick ditto on the update that Kyle offered on the technical assistance program and the call for projects that's out right now. I also mentioned before at previous TC meetings that CMAP, we're embarking on another household travel survey. Now that the dust has settled some, this survey will really try to focus in on post-pandemic patterns related to transit use, work from home. In that mid-April timeframe, we're going to do sort of a baby pilot of that survey just to make sure the mechanics are working properly, work out those kinks before we do a full launch. So just wanted you to be aware of that. What you have in front of you, this nice booklet here, this is a 2.0 of what we did last year, where we really attempted to highlight the priority projects of the region in light of a lot of these competitive grant agreements, competitive grant programs through IIJA. Thank you to our partners who really help us pull that together. We hope that it will serve us, our region, collectively well. There's also an ability to download this off of our website if you wanted to point others to that booklet. And then finally, for the benefit of this committee, I just wanted to let you know that CMAP staff have been working with both the chair and vice chair to look more proactively at our meetings over the course of this year, to be more thoughtful about the things that come before this committee. We want to really honor your time and make sure that the topics that we cover are really relevant to what we need to tackle together as a region. And some of those topics we've identified are safety, climate, ADA accessibility, and certainly the next regional transportation plan. These are topics that will require a series of discussions. Some of them may even sort of spin off and become separate discussions in order to do justice to those topics. So just work with us. Let us know what topics you'd like to have discussed over the course of the year. We're trying to be, again, very thoughtful about the use of this time. We know that everyone is really busy. But the goal here is to be more vigilant in continuing our committee's collective dialogue around these big topics, such as safety. And that's why you see MUTCD highlighted today on our agenda, as that's a really big change and a move in a really good direction for safety. And that's it. I'll turn things over back to the chair.
Great. Thank you, Amy, for those updates. Moving on to item 3.01, the meeting minutes. We have before us today the draft meeting minutes from our December 15th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes as presented? Thank you, Mayor. A second? Check. All right. Motion second. Is there any discussion on the minutes we have today? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, item 4.01, Russell is here to provide an overview of the fiscal year 23 to 2028 Transportation Improvement Program amendments. Good morning, Russell.
Good morning. I know this is always the highlight of the meeting, so I understand the importance here. Included in your packet today is a memo detailing the 65 tip changes contained in formal tip amendment 24-05 and the 212 tip changes contained in administrative amendments 24-05.1 and 24-05.2. As seen in the memo, formal amendments resulted in an increase of $454.9 million in total project costs for all prior, current, and future years. There are a lot of good investments in the region that are reflected in the formal tip amendment, and I'm going to highlight just a couple of those. Kane County was awarded a $25 million infra grant for a grade separation on Randall Road that was included in this tip amendment. Construction for I-55 Weber Road, the Airport Road project, RSP A3, is moving along, and they increased funding for that project by adding almost $28 million to the tip for that project. So that's good to see that investment continuing. Most of the increases, however, were attributed to the CTA. The CTA added $416 million to the tip. This is a combination of funding that was for continuing projects, such as $178 million in bond payments and $84 million to continue electric bus purchases and other planning and infrastructure upgrades. And they also had new projects and additional investments, such as $44 million that is being used to rehabilitate stations, another $120 million that is being used for Series 9000 rail car purchases, and $43 million for some track work. So it's good to see there's lots of transit investments occurring during this tip cycle. Administrative amendments added $109.4 million to the tip in all prior, current, and future years. The net change for total cost in the tip from all amendments resulted in $563.79 million being added to the tip in prior, current, and future years. As shown in the memo, project phases moving into and out of the tip comprise most of the formal changes, and administrative amendments were primarily schedule and cost changes. The amendments, along with the memo, were posted on February 23rd for committee and public review. And I will ask for approval of a formal tip amendment 24-05 is requested at this time. If there are any questions, I can answer them.
Great, thank you, Russell. Before we get to questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve tip amendment 24-05.
So moved.
Thank you, Tara. Do I have a second? Righty, thank you very much. Any questions for Russell? Discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Russell. Item 4.02, proposed fiscal year 25 UWP program. Amy's going to be back on the mic to give us an update on that.
Good morning. I'll just present from here, if that's okay. CMAP staff, we issued a call for transportation planning projects in late November in accordance with the new UWP. So UWP stands for Unified Work Program Development Methodology that was approved by the UWP committee on October 23rd. As many of you know, that committee has been working on updating the methodology behind how we sort of align the activities of the UWP to what we need to accomplish here as a region. So there's sort of a core aspect of that program, and then a competitive aspect of that program. What might help you sort of get your mind wrapped around how those are different. Core is sort of directed to sort of baseline operations that need to make sure we're doing due diligence in our planning activities here as a region. Competitive is a little bit more around emerging issues or emerging needs that need to be addressed and have funding put behind them. So in our effort to update the methodologies related to core, there was a greater focus on the activities and the tasks that were being presented. And then for the competitive, we took a more quantitative scoring methodology. Lo and behold, planning. We're trying to use metrics here for project selection. So core budgets were submitted by 7 agencies, including CMAP, and 4 competitive project proposals were submitted. Those details can be found in your packet. Staff reviewed and scored the proposals using this new methodology, presented these recommendations to the UWP committee in January. That included an FY25 UWP core budget of just under 33.8 million, and then an FY25 competitive budget program of a budget of a little over 563,000. So the total FY25 budget that we're proposing is 34.3 million. Just over half of this budget is for operational expenses for CMAP and Council of Mayors, about a quarter for work by all partners to develop, maintain, and advance the regional transportation plan. Another 12% is dedicated to the TIP, which includes all of our federal funding programs, including STP, CMAC, CRP, and local TAP programs. And then the balance of funding is for congestion management, process, performance monitoring, public participation, and other transportation planning activities. The FY25 budget included here includes funding for CMAP, CDOT, the Council of Mayors, CTA, Metra, PACE, and DuPage County. As also noted in the packet, the UWP contains over 1.3 million for activities to increase safe and accessible options for multiple transit modes. IIJA required a minimum of our budget, 2.5% of our budget, to be committed to these sorts of activities. I'm really happy to say that the budget we're proposing here represents nearly 4% of the overall budget. So I just wanted to highlight that for you all. And then, okay, yes, the other difference here in our competitive program is we're trying to shift to a multi-year programming effort. So in addition to the FY25 budget, programming of just under 1.1 million for FY26 competitive projects and 242,000 for FY27 competitive projects is also recommended for your consideration. So the recommendations were available for public comment from January 17th to January 26th. No comments were received. On February 7th, the UWP committee unanimously approved this proposed UWP. So CMAP staff and the UWP committee are now requesting your consideration and recommendation for this UWP for MPO policy committee approval. Glad to take any questions.
All right, thanks, Amy. We'll get it on the floor first, then we'll open up the discussion. So do we have a motion to approve the fiscal year 25 UWP budget as proposed? Jack, motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Chuck, second. All right, any questions or discussion? Anything? Amy, Kyle.
Yeah, I know my colleague Heather has been part of some of these discussions within the UWP committee, and we support the program and are excited about these investments. I just wanted to mention, I think we have a desire to see at least 1 million per year for the competitive program moving forward. You mentioned the shift from towards a multi-year program, which I know makes this process more complicated, but looking at this year's number, I know we're short of that $1 million goal. Well, next year's number exceeds that, right? So I think if we can try to work towards exceeding that, at least $1 million for the competitive program, it allows more agencies to access those funds, and the region has talked about that as a goal in the past.
Yeah, that's a great point to highlight, Kyle. And I think that move towards a multi-year program is really also in context to making sure that we're fully utilizing what funds are available for that competitive program, right? We know that collectively we have a charge to try to use those dollars when we have stated a commitment to executing on certain planning activities. Sometimes it takes longer than we think. And so how can we recycle those dollars and make sure that various planning activities are well funded and moving forward? So I hear you. And I think that that in combination with a multi-year program will really help support projects that want to get through the pipeline. I will say it is that desire to see these projects moving quicker and spending down faster that has resulted in this lower dollar amount in the first year. I think everyone was a little bit more realistic about how quickly they can get their projects through procurement and so on. And so that is why we see that lower dollar come in. That was just based on request.
All right, thanks, Kyle. Any other questions or comments? All right, I'll just say real quick, big thank you to CMAP staff, UWP committee. I know there was a lot of discussion last year and there's a lot of changes as alluded to the multi-year programming and some of the levels and targets set from EJA and stuff like that. So I know it's, everything went through on schedule and unanimously approved and stuff like that. So great job in making those changes on the fly and getting all that stuff done. So I just wanted to say that. All right, we got a motion in a second. So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving on to item 5.01, Regional Climate Action Plan. We have Nora Beck with us today to discuss this topic. So good morning, Nora.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nora Beck, a Principal Policy Analyst in our Regional Policy and Implementation Division. Over the past year, I've been working to help the agency map out our short and midterm climate mitigation projects, and I wanted to provide you with an update on that work today. Before I get into those details, I just wanted to reflect on the recent reports that 2023 was the hottest year on record by a large margin. With our winterless winters here in Chicago, 2024 could be on track to break those records. Scientists have reached overwhelming consensus that climate change is here and is intensifying, and the consequences are diverse. I'm sure each of you have seen these impacts in your respective lines of work. In northeastern Illinois, we are familiar with heavy rains and flooding, as well as extreme heat, humidity, more frequent freeze-thaw events. And elsewhere, other regions are experiencing intense droughts, water scarcity, rising sea levels, and severe fires, whose wildfire smoke definitely impacted us last summer. Regardless of where you look across the world, people are facing severe impacts, but it is not too late for us to limit the worst impacts of climate change by transitioning to an economy that reduces and eventually eliminates the dependence on fossil fuels. So we are seeing some regional progress. The region has reduced its greenhouse gas emissions by 9% since 2010. However, these decreases are not enough to achieve the reduction goals we've set in onto 2050, or the updated federal goals that you can see in the blue line that reflect the latest that science is telling us, that we need to hit the net zero emissions by 2050 to avoid the worst impacts. In our draft FY25 work plan, you'll see a focus on climate. We are proposing a lot of climate-related work, and I wanted to take a moment to reflect on some additional reasons why we are doing this at this time. So first, the federal government has made net zero greenhouse gas emission commitments, and we know that these are going to begin to require metropolitan planning organizations to elevate climate action in our work. And first on the docket is a new federal performance measure to set declining targets for greenhouse gas emissions on the national highway system. I'm going to provide an overview of this measure and our response to it in a moment. And then second, there are huge opportunities available right now to tackle this work and reap the co-benefits. So the Inflation Reduction Act offers funding, programs, incentives to accelerate this transition to a clean energy economy. Analysts have estimated that the IRA could reduce U.S. emissions by 40% by 2030, and it's critical that we harness those investments here in the region to help us hit our greenhouse gas emission goals and improve our quality of life and advance our other objectives. So the bulk of my presentation is going to focus on how we are working with our partners to position the region to do that. But first, let's cover this federal performance measure. So the US DOT recently finalized a rule that adds another federal performance measure to the 17 that CMAP already has. And as you know, our existing federal performance measures address asset conditions, system performance, and safety on the roadway and transit systems. So this new measure requires states and MPOs to set declining targets for greenhouse gas emissions on the national highway system relative to 2022. IDOT has already set this target in accordance with the new rule. At the beginning of February, they established a target of 2.6% reduction from 2022 to 2026 for tailpipe CO2 emissions on the national highway system. We here at CMAP have 6 months to adopt our targets, and we actually have to set 3 targets based on a few different geographies that you can see listed here. There are no direct penalties for failure to meet these targets. CMAP anticipates adopting targets at the MPO and board meetings in June. In order to do that, we, and by we, I mean my colleague, Martin Menager and the team, have already started to develop the required 2022 baseline with our travel model, and we are exploring potential paths for how to set that greenhouse gas emission target. We will be coordinating with Sewer PAC and NERC on the urbanized area targets, and you'll hear more about the approach in the coming months in advance of the June board and MPO meetings, which is when we're going to seek adoption. These targets will be in effect until 2026, and then we'll have an opportunity to update them to reflect what we are learning in our climate action planning work. So that's a good segue to tell you more about that work. Some of you may have heard about the US EPA Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program, which was established by the Inflation Reduction Act. This program provides $5 billion in grants to states and local governments to develop and implement ambitious plans for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and other harmful air pollution. The program consists of 2 parts. The first is a non-competitive formula planning grant, and then the second is approximately $4.6 billion in competitive grants to work on implementing the strategies that have been identified in the planning process. Here are the stated objectives. Again, develop those ambitious plans and fund transformative projects that can help implement them. And both of these activities need to advance the Justice 40 initiative, which aims to deliver 40% of the benefits to low-income and disadvantaged communities. So the first phase of the CPRG program is well underway. This past year, US EPA provided those formula grants to all states and the largest metro statistical areas that opted in, and we're all working to complete climate action plans with specific required elements. The state of Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana all responded to this call, and they will also be drafting climate action plans. In Illinois, our EPA is the lead applicant. And then for the Chicago MSA, the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus responded for our region in partnership with CMAP and NERC. The Chicago MSA includes 9 counties in Illinois, 1 in Wisconsin, and 4 in Indiana. And we have 3 planning deliverables that we're required to complete in this program. The first of which is a priority climate action plan, and the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus is taking the lead on that. And then CMAP will lead the remaining 2 deliverables, the development of a comprehensive climate action plan, and then a status report that will report out on progress that we're making in implementing that plan a couple years afterwards. So the priority climate action plan provides a list of near-term, high-priority, implementation-ready measures to reduce greenhouse gas pollution. The plan is designed to guide that implementation funding for the second portion of the US EPA program. And so to do that, the PCAP is actually due today, March 1st, 2024. The Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus has been able to meet this incredibly tight deadline due to all the prior work that they've been doing on regional climate action planning, including their 2021 plan. CMAP assisted in specific areas. We helped develop the greenhouse gas inventory for this larger geography. We made our own recommended edits to the strategies to try to broaden the array of implementers that we think are critical to climate action. And then we helped with a few other critical elements, including the identification of low-income and disadvantaged communities as defined by the US EPA. The next major deadline of the US EPA program is also quickly approaching. That's the competitive implementation grants for strategies and jurisdictions that are covered by that priority climate action plan. And this is where the significant money is. The implementation funding is focused on policies, programs, and projects that can reduce greenhouse gas emissions and deliver on the low-income and disadvantaged community benefits. We here at CMAP have been working with our leaders and at the county scale and regional organizations and at the state to ensure that the region is participating in this program and putting forth a competitive application. We identified immediately that pulling together a regional coalition in the process would be critical to avoid competing with one another and really putting forth that transformative project that the funding opportunity calls for. The city of Chicago stepped up to this challenge and they submitted a notice of intent on behalf of the region, and they've been working really closely with Cook County in developing the application. And we're working to get additional counties to join that effort. So applications are due in 30 days. We'll hopefully have great news to announce and really be able to jumpstart our climate work through this opportunity. So once we get past all these short-term deadlines, we've got this longer project on our horizon, which is the development of a comprehensive climate action plan. Again, CMAP will be leading this work for the Chicago MSA in partnership with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus and NERC. This plan needs to identify solutions to address all the significant sources and sinks of greenhouse gas emissions. We need to be able to estimate greenhouse gas reductions from those strategies and then develop implementation targets that demonstrate how the region could meet the national goals of net zero by 2050. We have just under a year and a half before the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan is due in July 2025. And again, the CMAP, the CCAP, I'm sorry for all the acronyms, it's focused on laying out that larger, longer term strategy for reducing those emissions. While it's not directly connected to a funding source like the PCAP, these plans could be used to determine funding in the future, given how many states and regions are participating in this program. I wanted to spend a moment reflecting on all the sectors this plan will need to address to truly be comprehensive and meet the goals of the program. We will literally have to talk about everything in this planning process. We're going to have to work with an array of partners across a much larger geography than what we're used to. The solutions are likely going to be hard, right? They have the potential to impact every resident, business, and jurisdiction. But only by working together will the region be able to identify and support the strategies that are best suited to reach our reduction goals. And while this work will be challenging, I think it presents a critical opportunity. Many of these strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions will create great co-benefits, right? They'll help us clean our air with criteria pollutants, making our streets safer, building communities that are healthier and more active, providing access to jobs, lowering transportation costs. I think the list goes on and on. A lot of these goals have been at the core of our regional vision. And now with the climate crisis, it gives us added weight and urgency to implement them. So as we gear up for the climate action plan, we wanted to share a bit of what we learned in the development of the greenhouse gas inventory for the 14 counties of the Chicago MSA. As you may know, CMAP has been regularly producing greenhouse gas inventories to help inform decision-making. This inventory is a little bit different from the ones we've done in the past. First, it's more reliant on national data and tools. That's due in part to the advancement of those federal resources, but also to the time constraints that we had on our end to pull local data together for such a large area. Second, it's based on county level estimates, and it adds a few more sectors that we previously haven't included. There's a lot to unpack in this inventory, so today I just wanted to first identify the relative contributions of the sectors. And as I step through this, please keep track of any further questions that you want us to ask and explore in the data. So in 2020, the 14 counties in the Chicago MSA produced approximately 160 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. That number is sort of hard to comprehend, but perhaps some of you have done greenhouse gas assessments of your own systems or your jurisdictions and could help us put that number in perspective. The inventory also reveals that we have two prominent emission sectors, which might be hard to distinguish in this pie chart. It's really industry and transportation, and they comprise over 50% of our total emissions. We know that our region plays an important role as a national transportation and manufacturing hub, and these economic drivers are producing significant greenhouse gas emissions and make our region a major contributor to the national total GHG output. Digging into the transportation sector a bit more, approximately 23% of the regional emissions come from transportation, and that on-road transportation is the largest source of the transportation emissions, and it is the largest subsector overall across the inventory. Within on-road transportation, approximately 64% of the emissions are coming from light-duty vehicles, such as private cars, SUVs, and small trucks. And then an additional 21% of those on-road transportation emissions are coming from heavy-duty vehicles. To supplement our climate action planning work and to better understand how to reduce emissions in the transportation sector, CMAP, in partnership with ComEd and the Respiratory Health Association, responded to a competitive funding opportunity through the National Renewable Energy Laboratory called the Clean Energy to Communities Initiative. We were successful, and this award pairs us with Argonne and Oak Ridge National Laboratories to better understand the types and scale of action needed to foster a clean energy transition of our region's transportation system. Historically, transportation planners and utility planners have worked in separate areas, but with vehicle electrification, we need to start understanding the long-term needs and challenges of each other's systems as we work toward a common goal of net zero GHGs in 2050. So we know achieving this goal is going to require a combination of strategies, including system-wide vehicle electrification, mode shift, and operational changes to improve efficiencies in our existing system. This project seeks to better define not only the potential solutions, but also the costs and benefits to allow for more informed decision-making as we develop and implement the climate action plan. So in the coming years, we are going to be tackling some big questions, and it's wonderful to have Argonne and Oak Ridge at our side. So thanks again for your time. I hope I've provided you with a solid understanding of our next steps on climate action planning, including establishing that federal greenhouse gas performance target and our upcoming work over the next year and a half to tackle these large and challenging questions about how to comprehensively reduce emissions in our region. We look forward to working with you on this, and I'm super curious about your reactions to this information. Where does this line up with the concerns and opportunities that you are seeing? What would be critical for your work to transition to a cleaner economy? Where would you want to focus? And then I wanted to refer again to that question of like, what, as I step through the greenhouse gas inventory, what other information would you like to see that can help us unpack this issue? So thanks again for your time.
Great. Thank you very much, Nora. So kind of open it up here to the group. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks so much for the presentation. I have two questions that are kind of just based on understanding like what transportation is covered, right? So one is just relating the federal greenhouse gas reduction goal, that's the national highway system, to all, but I'm assuming the comprehensive climate action plan will cover all roads, right?
Correct.
So how do those two things relate? And then the other is just, I'm always interested in, for transportation inventories, we have many vehicles passing through our region and not stopping, right? And then we have, so how do you, which emissions count, I guess, is the question.
That's a great question. I think we still have, on the second question, Jen, I think we have a lot more work to do to unpack and really understand where the emission sources that are coming from our region, from vehicles in the region versus ones that are passing through. I think it's pretty clear that for our region to hit net zero greenhouse gas emissions, additional changes at the state and federal scale are going to be needed, right? We know that we're part of an interconnected system we're not an island. And so likely the climate action plan will be suggesting additional steps that are needed by other actors outside of what we can do here. You're right. So to your first question, the performance measure is just focused on the national highway system, but the climate action plan will need to cover the entire transportation sector. And so we'll have to do that configuration and understand the difference as we set those targets.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, Tara.
Thank you for a great presentation, Nora. I have two questions. The first one is just building off of Jennifer's question. Can you clarify the difference between the national highway system and everything else for when we take this back to our teams, kind of a 101 on that, please?
I am going to defer to my colleagues. What's the
Okay.
Thank you, Russell.
But I mean,
Yeah,
because
sure.
I wrote down like a 2.6% reduction on the national highway system was what the state set. And so kind of just understanding where these respective goals are and, what we have control over versus what we don't.
Yeah.
I think it's important that we understand that distinction of the national
Yeah,
highway
very
system.
good point.
I will take this one. Me and Martin are the ones that are kind of leading the effort on the GHG stuff. I'm doing the modeling part. On the NHS system, it's about 75% of our network that we model, as it turns out. So it is a significant proportion of what we're modeling in our transportation demand model. That's our initial analysis. It's about 75%. Roughly in that range. So while it's not everything that we model, it is a significant portion. So it would make a significant impact. There are other things that go into modeling and assumptions and stuff like that. But we can look at it, and we do have a way to pull out just the NHS system from our existing model that we use. I don't know if you need more, we can always provide a technical discussion too. There's a lot that goes into this.
Yeah, no, it's not every road. It's about 75% of those in the region, right? And
It's about
generally. the ones-
75% of what we model in the region. So
Okay.
for instance, we're not going to model subdivisions. That's not in our transportation model network per se. So it's
Mhm.
in our existing modeling network, the same stuff we would use for conformity. That we use for our travel demand model. So everything that's in there. So that's why it's important to have stuff accurate and tipped. That's part of that. That's where we get future improvements and future system enhancements and things like that. But it is all the stuff that we model. We don't, no system models the entirety of the network. The network itself has all different functional classifications that we know. And so, we do have the entire NHS system on there, but, we're not going to have alleyways. We're not going to have stuff that we don't have vehicle counts for, things of that nature.
Russell,
So
the national highway system is something that we can look up on a map, right? That there's.
you can look it up on a map. We have an FHWA rep who might actually be able to provide more context on that, who's raising his hand.
And I believe it's a collector designation or above, right? with the
Right, yeah,
national
it's
highway
actually
system.
arterial and above. So arterial and above, and then there's a number of.
Oh, it's arterial.
Arterial and above, other
Okay.
principal arterials and above. So your high volume roads, so expressways, interstates, and arterials that serve the majority of your traffic. And then you also have a number of intermodal, like connector NHS routes that connect to transit facilities, intermodal facilities, and other important facilities to like intermodal and transit.
It's arterials and above, which is an important, distinction. But those would be the most heavily traveled and congested roadways.
Yeah, and so when I say it's 75%, it's 75% of the VMT. It's not necessarily 75% of the lane miles or something like that. We didn't look at it that way. So it's 75, emissions are going to be generated from VMT is a critical component to that. So it's where the traffic is, which is going to be mainly on the NHS system in our region. It's not the same throughout the entire state. So I think the state was 56% roughly was the NHS system represented of their entire VMT.
Thank you. And speaking of traffic, this is my second question. It said 14 counties and it said the 2020 Chicago MSA greenhouse gas inventory. There was a slide and you mentioned 160 million metric tons of carbon equivalent.
Yeah.
The 2020 number is what concerned me. I'm just wondering, when was the data collected for that? Because it's a very noisy year for us as implementing agencies. We generally don't use any traffic data for that reason because of the pandemic. So can you provide some information about the data? Concern being if we're using what we collected in 2020 and setting goals based off of that, we're going to have a difficult time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had similar concerns. We ultimately went with the data because it was a data set that was available throughout the entire geography. So that was an important need that we had in developing the inventory. When looking at the details, we recognize that the inventory using the national data sets, the actual data year of the subcomponents varies a little bit as information is uploaded into the federal data and resources. So there's some, when we say 2020, there's some distinction in the items, just what the actual vintage is. We can provide more detail on that. I think we recognize that there could be some differences. I think another important point is that this is something that we'll continue to update and refine as we go forward. As Martin and Russell we're as part of that GHG emissions performance measure, we'll be developing a 2022 baseline for understanding of GHG. So that information is also going to contribute to this overall climate action planning effort. So we're going to be conscious of that and try to understand the differences as we go forward. But there's definitely some limitations in just what happened in 2020.
Yeah, and just to provide a little context, we're talking about, this is the NEI data, so it's the National Emissions Inventory. It's an EPA database. While it's called the 2020 database, it's actually, that's the year that the data is kind of populated into the system. They update this on a regular cycle, just like the census, you would call it the 2010 census or 2020. So some of the data, a lot of it was actually from 2019. And by the time it got into the collection effort in 2020, it was actually 2019 data being populated into what they call the 2020 NEI. They're now in the process of updating the NEI to the next grouping, and that'll be mainly from 2022 data, is my understanding. But there's a lot, if one of the slides that Nora has, there's a lot of sectors, and all sectors don't update their data in the same timeframes and stuff like that. So that's why it's called the 2020 NEI data. That's when they published a whole new grouping. The subsets are from different years and different approaches that they have to getting those kinds of information. But the good thing is it's national. So kind of the methodology that goes into that is more consistent nationwide. So as we look to, we don't want to always be unique in terms of how we're calculating things. So sometimes it's good to be able to compare us to, some national trends and national data sets too. And as Nora pointed out, we do have to work on multiple states now and larger geography, and we don't necessarily have the same level of information for those. So this is a good source for that.
All right, thanks. We got Audrey and then Amy, I think.
Yeah, hi Nora, thanks for the great presentation. You must be so tired today after that deadline. You look really alert. Wondering, we're going to be setting our own target by this summer. How are you thinking about this affecting how we make our transportation investments? In order to meet that target, I would assume that we're now going to have to make calculations and have GHG emissions inform which projects we advance in the region. So can you talk at all about that?
Apologies, everybody. I'm gonna go to my support staff here. Martin, can you help weigh in on how this performance measure gets incorporated into our work?
That's a big question. So we have already, even in our past rounds, we have included data on greenhouse gas emissions for our RSPs. So we are not calculating emissions for each individual project, just the projects we model, such as RSPs. But we will continue to we've brought in different performance measures, safety, pavement condition, and things like that into our evaluation process. So we're constantly looking at ways to bring these in to how we evaluate projects like STP and CMAC. But I think there's a lot more work to do in this area. I'm looking to Amy if she has more to add.
And this is, ongoing in our discussions around the definitions of RSPs, right? We, as you picked up on, we are pressed in a direction of really needing to try to quantify, right, a lot of these things related to air quality in ways that we haven't had to before. The data isn't all there. The model is also somewhat limited too. And so this isn't going to be perfect. We recognize that. But I think that what the value that I see in a lot of the work that will be going behind the climate action plan that Nora is going to be working on is helping us recognize the magnitude of the issue. We're not talking about splitting hairs here. we're going to be talking about some pretty significant and drastic changes that are really going to be needed for us to be net zero by 2050. And so while we can sort of try to split hairs on some of these things, I think what we'll see is we're really talking about some significant changes across all sectors that are going to be needed to get us there. And that will at least inform our individual efforts to see how we build into that overall picture and where do we want to be as a region. And so I value the question because I too, internally, we are trying to figure out how can we best represent projects and these individual decisions as it relates to this big picture question and target that we're trying to hit by 2050. We're working on it.
Hi. So the slide with the pie chart by sectors was really useful. Could you speak at all to which of those are improving over time and which ones have been harder to bring down?
Yeah, and so this is a great question. Due to the changes in the methodology that we're using and the geography, it's a little hard to compare our results to our previous CMAP inventories that have been for a much smaller area and using a different approach. When we look at our comparison of the 2010 to 2019 CMAP GHG inventories, we see that we are seeing those declines, that 9% overall decline. But that's primarily been in the cleaning up of the electricity grid and efficiencies in the building sector. We did see that transportation greenhouse gas emissions increased by 2% during that time period.
Yeah, my understanding is that freight might have been one of the major contributors to that, right? So I would just suggest that maybe heavy duty vehicle decarbonization and freight in particular might be a particular focus here because that's the sector we have not made a lot of progress in.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we were so excited by the partnership with Argonne and Oak Ridge National Laboratories. They have a transportation model that really captures freight movements at a finer level of detail than we have. And they have existing partnerships with different freight companies. They've already been exploring some of these critical questions. So we're going to be able to harness that work and put it towards a process where we can explore the benefits and costs of different approaches.
Yes, Kyle.
Thank you, Nora, for your work on the PCAP and everybody else who contributed. I know it was a really tight timeline and a big project. Is a draft of that, or I guess final draft now available, or could it be shared?
I believe that will be happening today.
Okay.
So we'll be sure to get it to you.
I'll keep an eye on my inbox then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding, I know there was lots of convening and discussion around the development of that plan, and my understanding is within the transportation sector, a lot of the priority strategies drifted towards electrification, given a lot of, the real focus on near-term opportunity and investment, right? So maybe the quickest way to reduce emissions is to replace a diesel bus with a electric bus, or even more so electrification elsewhere in the sector. But I know and we all know that the second big part of this conversation is giving people options other than driving, right? Supporting the transit system and helping people drive less. And that's where my understanding in the context of the PCAP conversations, we weren't able to identify a lot of opportunities in terms of transformative near-term projects that would meet that goal. So for the longer process with the July 2025 timeline, I think we're really hoping to see, of course, continuation of a focus on the electrification, but also a big focus on transformative projects that will help reduce VMT. And that includes investments in the transit system, both operations and capital, and a lot of things we've talked about in the context of the many part discussions at this table. I think it also means redesigning major roadway corridors in ways that support alternative uses, including bus and transit. And that's where I don't think there's been a lot of discussion and attention in recent years. And it's a contributing factor to, some of the growth in VMT and the growth in emissions. So I think we are eager to work on with others to try to identify some of those transformative projects, look at major corridors. Lots of discussions happening around 290 and Lakeshore Drive right now, for example. How can we design those corridors in ways that will reverse the troubling trend on GHG emissions and help meet the region's transit ridership goals that are really, really ambitious?
Yeah, I think you pointed to sort of the structural constraint of the deadlines that we had with the CPRG program and needing to identify those priority areas within the priority climate action plan that can be completed through these implementation grants that need to be spent down by October of 2029. So it tilted that conversation towards what you described. And you're right, the CCAP is the space for those longer term conversations about mode shift.
All right, yeah, Jack.
I just wanted to say from IEPA's perspective, the medium heavy duty freight sector is definitely one we're looking into. As some of you probably saw this week, US EPA released their Clean Ports NOFO. That is $3 billion toward dry and wet ports across the country with additional planning funding in there. So if that is something that you're interested, definitely check it out. The planning funding is 100% federal funding. And so not only the Clean Ports program, but you've also got the Clean Heavy Duty program, which we anticipate coming out approximately a month from now. So both of those efforts will be very high priorities for us. And in the state's CPRG application, the clean freight is definitely a component we are looking into. So yeah, basically, if you have any operators you know of interested in medium heavy duty electrification space, please send them my way. Thank you.
All right. Looks like we're about wrapped up. So thank you, Nora. Very informative. I just want to let this committee know too. I think a lot of this, I guess, detailed discussions are going to continue at like climate committee too. So we can all check into that if it's something we're of interest in. And I think there's just going to be kind of like regular report outs to this committee because it's all going to feed into 2050 and like the long range plan, RSPs and all that discussion. So great job, Nora. Very informative. Thank you. All right. Let's see here. Moving on to item 5.02. We have with us today Ryan and Elizabeth, who are going to be giving us an update on the regional plan efforts, including the long-range transportation plan. So good morning, Ryan.
Good morning. I'm joining here in person. Elizabeth is joining us online.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Sorry, I can't be there with you in person. I'm out of state on a family issue, so my apologies, and just let me know if you're having trouble hearing me.
Nope, we're good.
Okay, excellent. So Ryan and I are going to tag team this presentation for you to try and keep it lively, and keeping an eye on the time here, we're just going to try to move through it quickly so you can get the rest of your agenda. I assure you this will be the first of many conversations on this topic, but I think that the main thing to know that we really wanted to bring to you beginning today is that the staff have been hard at work thinking about what comes after Onto 2050 and about, what has been effective for us in the past and where we might wish to continue to evolve our regional planning process to best meet the context of today and the region's needs. So we're going to start to talk to you about where we believe we're going today. But yeah, first of many conversations. So just in terms of the basic stuff, one place to start is oh, and I should apologies for not introing myself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Elizabeth Scott. As Ryan said, a principal in CMAP's regional policy and implementation team. And I have worked on regional planning issues for a long time at the agency. So anyway, some important context to understand when you're thinking about CMAP's regional planning responsibilities is that we have both federal responsibilities that come to us as through our role as the region's metropolitan planning organization. These are the responsibilities I think that you all are most intimately familiar with, given your roles as implementers. This has to do with our responsibility over shepherding the region's transportation and capital investment and transportation funding and finance systems forward. but we also have responsibilities given to us by the state of Illinois through the Regional Planning Act that taps CMAP to be the comprehensive planning agency for the Chicago region. And our state requirements, at their highest level, charge CMAP for planning for land use and transportation together. Our state regulations also require that we, periodically issue regional plans or draft regional plans to be adopted by the region that guide the physical development of the region and establish the foundation for planning in the region. So we have, both these responsibilities together are things that have to be considered when we carry out our regional activities. Next slide, please. Beyond meeting regulatory requirements, there is a lot of value to be had in bringing the region together to invest in a regional plan. So some things to keep in mind beyond meeting regulatory requirements are that this is a time where we really put work into anticipating big picture challenges and opportunities on the horizon. CMAP is the only agency in the region that has the responsibility to look out to the distant horizon and host conversations about how we get from the problems of today or the next 5 to 10 years to the opportunities of that 20 or 30-year time frame. And you all will appreciate that a lot of the things that are really big and transformational, especially in infrastructure, do require viewing things over that long arc. So we're keeping the long arc in mind. It's a good time to generate consensus among regional leaders on strategy and on issues of shared importance, to have conversations about things that are hard, especially when it comes to how we're going to make investments and whether the regulatory apparatus that supports us needs to evolve in any way. We formally adopt the region's policy on key issues. And then by establishing that regional planning framework, other agencies and local communities have access to the region's planning framework when they need to justify and carry out and have guidance on projects that they're doing locally. So there's just a lot of value in the regional planning process beyond meeting our regulatory needs. And as many of you will be aware, CMAP as an agency will next year be celebrating its 25th birthday, 20th birthday in the year 2025. And CMAP was created in the early mid-2000s through the merger of the region's transportation planning agency and the region's land use planning agency. And so we have had 4 major, or really 2 major and 2 minor regional plans during this time period. The main ones being Go to 2040 and On to 2050. Great news, Bob Dean is in the room and can answer all your questions about all of those plans. But these have been really big, major comprehensive planning efforts from the agency and from the regional partners, the 2040 plan and the 2050 plan especially. And sort of how this has worked is we've done a really big plan, and then 4 years later, to meet federal requirements to continuously update the region's transportation plan, we've done a minor update. And then 4 years after that, we've done another big plan, and then a little plan, and then a big plan, and then a little plan. So we've sort of been on this like seesaw path with the regional planning documents. And the cadence of these things is something that we've been thinking about and sort of asking ourselves what we like about that and what we don't like about it. One thing is that in order to develop one of these major plans, a Go to 2040 or an On to 2050, you really have to mobilize the whole agency over multiple years to deliver that level of product. And that's a resource consideration, but it's also a focus of the implementers and the regional partners consideration. So next slide, please. And then next slide. So where we are today really is with the policy guidance of On to 2050. On to 2050 was developed based basically in 2016 and 2017 and adopted in 2018. The region in the fall of 2022 adopted an update to On to 2050, but the kind of fundamental policies of that plan were not updated at that time. So the fundamental policies of the regional plan now are, coming on 10 years old. And that is something for us to consider. But in order to make the plan, we had it was a huge effort. As I said, mobilized most of the staff over a long period of time. We had dozens of reports. We had, lots of drafts. We engaged with more than 100,000 people in the general public about, what they see in the future and what they want for communities. We did a large-scale scenario planning process. And then here, click through, please. And we had about 1 million position papers, more even than part, which I'm sure will be shocking to those of you who read the part ones recently. So this is a lot of effort. And so one of the things that the team has been doing is thinking about in context of everything that we have in front of us. I mean, you all just heard from Nora the very urgent work that we as an agency and we as a region have to do around climate action. We're thinking about whether we might want to approach these responsibilities a bit differently. And so now I'll flip it to Ryan to talk to you about our thought process more, and then we'll have some time for a discussion too.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So as Elizabeth mentioned, as we've been working to prepare for the next comprehensive plan, we have been grappling with the context of the moment, both coming out of the pandemic with mobility recovery work and then part. But in addition to that, there's the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA, that has unleashed incredible amounts of resources that CMAP has worked to leverage to advance key critical longstanding efforts to address things like climate change, transportation resilience, safety, economy, equity, et cetera. And so as we've been thinking ahead, we've been really trying to figure out how do we build on Go to 2040 and on to 2050 and keep the momentum and the best practices that we've established through that work, while also balancing it with these other big swing initiatives that we have underway, so that we're able to keep momentum going in each of those areas. And so to think this through, we've been asking ourselves, how might we rethink our approach to comprehensive planning in the region? So to begin with, we looked to our peers. We looked across peer MPOs that also, or metropolitan planning organizations like CMAP, that have, in addition to their federal requirements as an MPO, additional state requirements, as CMAP does. And so we looked at numerous MPOs, but we've highlighted 3 here today. They're located in Puget Sound Regional Council, which is the MPO for the Seattle-Tacoma region in the state of Washington, the Metropolitan Council, or the Met Council, which is the MPO for the Twin Cities region in Minnesota, and then the Atlanta Regional Commission, or ARC, which is the MPO for the Atlanta region in Georgia. Next slide. So starting with the Met Council in the Twin Cities, for decades, the Met Council has successfully implemented a vision and subplans approach, which begins by developing an overarching vision. Their most recent one is known as Thrive 2040. This plan provides a long-term vision for the region's growth and development. And the Metropolitan Council developed several subplans focusing on specific topic areas such as transportation, housing, regional parks, and water resources to address their state and federal planning responsibilities. As you can see on this slide, each plan is updated on a cadence that makes the most sense for that topic area. This helps to smooth out demands on Met Council staff capacity, as well as the demands on engagement with partners. But this also creates space for more in-depth conversations on those specific topic areas where you can focus in on that particular issue. On the next slide, this shows the structure that the Puget Sound Regional Council uses, or PSRC. With this approach, They've again developed a regional vision that's updated every 10 years. And then they have two sub-plans, a regional transportation plan and a regional economic strategy that are both updated on separate cadences. And then finally, as we look to Atlanta Regional Commission in Georgia, they have developed an overarching structure called One Great Region. And so they refer to their planning framework as a family of plans. But again, you'll see in the middle, there is the Atlanta Regional Plan, which provides an overarching vision that overlaps those three main topic areas of regional economic strategy, regional transportation plan, and a healthy communities plan, as well as a constellation of additional plans or sub-plans that support those areas. So where are we going? So CMAP is now moving forward with developing our own vision and sub-plan approach. As evidenced by our peers, the approach will provide numerous opportunities to strengthen regional planning in Northeastern Illinois. Under this approach, CMAP and regional partners can set a bold new vision that builds upon the current plan principles, policies, and goals while refining comprehensive planning practices in important ways. CMAP's regional vision plan will build on the significant progress and direction provided by GO to 2040 and On to 2050. But it will help kind of detach us from that 4-year planning cycle that our regional transportation planning responsibilities have required. On to 2050 strategies and recommendations remain relevant in relation to the region's complex lasting issues. However, a single plan represents a single snapshot in time, and that can be difficult to evolve and adapt to new and evolving priorities, as we've seen with things like PART or the passage of IIJA. On to 2050 became very dated very quickly after those events. So as you can see on this slide, we're in the very, very early stages of developing this approach that fits the context of Northeastern Illinois. But this graphic shows what this approach could look like. As you'll see, there was a vision plan that is developed and serves as kind of a North Star, a guiding plan that more detailed topic-specific subplans are then developed to align with that vision. We've kind of grouped those subplans into the three focus areas of On to 2050 implementation of climate, transportation, and economy. This would allow us to then update or develop the vision plan, but then update those subplans on a cadence that makes sense for the state and federal requirements, but also the context of the time. So on the next slide, we have kind of two buckets of anticipated benefits that we see from shifting to this approach. They're grouped into ones that are about improving the actual plan product, but also how do we improve the process. So having this new approach having separate subplans will allow the region to dig deeper and tailor strategies and policies to specific needs and priorities of each topic area. Developing a vision for the region provides an opportunity for high-level public outreach, while developing subplans enables more extensive engagement with key stakeholders in curated topics. This approach would be geared to encourage meaningful and equitable participation from diverse stakeholders, fostering deeper collaboration and consensus building. In terms of process, having separate subplans, the region can maintain flexibility to address new and existing challenges or opportunities focused within specific topic areas, while staying aligned with an overarching regional vision. Additionally, topic area subplans would no longer be tied to the 4-year update cycle of the federal transportation planning requirements. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Elizabeth to talk next steps.
Yeah, so here's just a little preview of how would we actually achieve this. Next slide. Okay, so we are starting, and I am leading a process wherein the staff with consultant support is going to develop a vision process. And broadly speaking, this planning process, we're thinking about it as having three main components. And this is really just kind of more food for thought for you. One piece of it will be a foresight activity set. So that is doing some existing conditions research about the region, doing scenario planning to try to understand what are some of the grand challenges that may be on the horizon for us as a region, you know, both opportunities and threats. I mean, things that we would think about potentially would include things like how do we see climate change affecting us in the year 2050? Do we see people migrating here to avoid the worst of climate change? You know, what could that mean for us? What does you know, becoming a nation and a region of a substantially greater share of older adults, what does that mean for us? These kinds of big picture questions on the nature of our economy and the nature of our region and how the transportation system needs to respond. The next component would involve big piece of talking to the public and talking to stakeholders about what is important to us in this moment and into the future. And so that's we're terming our values activity set. And then we will kind of pull all of these things into a vision plan to be adopted by the region that is directional and then defines a list of subplans to be made and the timelines on which those plans would be made. We had thought we might ask for your thoughts on that, but looking at the clock, I'm wondering if perhaps we should defer that, Doug and Amy and chairs. What do you want us to do here?
I think if we can have some discussion on it, I think we're thinking by 11 o'clock. We need to get moving on to maybe the next topic. So we want to take some discussion out. We want to table it. Good. Okay. Well, yeah, we can probably do some, Elizabeth, like maybe 15 minutes or so, and then continue
Great.
at a future meeting or something, or see how it's going.
Super. So we've given you a little teaser of what we're thinking about and would love some just thoughts and questions about what the pros and cons of a move to the vision and subplan structure could be. And then Ryan has a few more slides in discussion with y'all about what this means for the RTP specifically, just to preempt that question, which I'm sure you'll have. But yeah, what thoughts?
I guess if I could start real quick, Elizabeth, just so I have it straight and maybe to clarify for everyone here. So there's a vision plan and then three, I guess, subplans you call it. So the vision plan would need to be created is what we're looking at with this slide. That's something that would need to be created.
Yep.
Economic plan, there's subcommittee and stuff maybe working on that. And then the climate plan, we just heard from Nora and stuff. So those are kind of all in process. And then would the 2050 plan kind of be our transportation plan, or is that kind of a combination of vision and transportation? Or I'm just trying to think of how the pieces kind of play here.
So the 2050 plan, we would honor and let go and introduce a new plan that hopefully embodies what we liked about it and adds things that are new. So if you can think of it like the vision plan would say things like, here's how we want to be prepared for climate change, and here's how we, you know, what our region's values and intention are on addressing our long-term transportation needs, and the kind of the directional overarching goals. And then we would have plans that would come along under that would relate to those goals, but have a lot more specificity, topical specificity. And then one of those plans would be the climate action plan. One of those plans would be the RTP, which is required to be updated every 4 years. So we would just put a new RTP under that umbrella whenever we need to put one there. It's kind of similar to how IDOT does their plan, if that's a helpful comparison.
Yeah, no, that was helpful. That kind of lays it out for me, so I appreciate that. All right. Any questions? Yeah, Jennifer? Yeah.
Whoever's controlling the slides, could you go to the anticipated benefits slide back a couple? So the one that really, I guess the two that pop up, right, are that seem really important here are the improved implementation and monitoring and the alignment with regional goals, right? That if this shift to a different timeline and structure allows for improvements in those areas, that seems really important. And I know, I appreciate that you looked at other regions, and I'm just wondering if there's anything specific or, anecdotes about how their structures really helped with that you could share, because I'm curious.
Yeah, I think a couple of the key highlights. I think one part of having an all hands on deck approach that it takes to do something like On Through 2050, the hope there is that you are breaking down silos, right? That by having a comprehensive plan, you're tying everything together. But one of the challenges that we find in terms of staffing, but also engagement and other type activities are that they end up getting very siloed because it's all hands on deck. If you're a subject matter expert in economy, you are entirely focused on the economy portions of the plan and transportation on transportation, climate on climate, et cetera. And so it's difficult when you're trying to have those bridge connections between like the intersection of economy and climate or transportation and climate, et cetera. And so by doing this overarching vision where you get that big level engagement, vision of where we want to go, that North Star component, it helps sets the values and the direction. But those subplans really let you dig in with cross-functional teams, with targeted engagement, and you can simplify it into the context of that specific topic. And so that really helps by having that vision that gets to that keeping regional goals, keeping the guiding principles consistent across all those subplans, but then allowing the specificity that goes into developing a topic-specific plan.
And I'll add on that a little bit, Ryan. Great question, Jen. I mean, one of the pieces of feedback that we've gotten from our regional partners and implementing agencies about Onto 2050 is that directionally everyone seems to be pretty happy with it, but when it comes to the recommendations, sometimes there's just not the specificity there that is really going to support CMAP or others putting together the coalitions to execute on individual items. So we're looking to develop plans that really are like more research to action oriented, but still provide that big picture goal that has the long-term future in mind. So a way to kind of have something that it can be more specific and be more tactical and be more timely within the broader context of who we believe we are and where we're going. So I see that as a big kind of improvement potential.
Great, thanks both of you.
Yep, we got Bob and then Kyle.
Yeah, as somebody who's been through a few of these, I certainly get the idea of spreading out the work, and that would make a lot of sense. The only thing I would say, I mean, the structure makes sense. I would think carefully about the substructures. A couple of the other regions that you mentioned have those structures because of specific responsibilities they have. It's like the Met Council has a parks plan and a water plan because they own the parks and they own the sewers, and ARC provides like senior services and workforce services, which drives the way their plans are structured. For CMAP's case, I think just make sure it's targeted to what CMAP wants to be involved in the implementation of.
Yeah, go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, obviously there's lots of cost benefit and trade-off here in this process. One thing I think concern or just question that I have within the transportation sector is in a lot of ways, like the transportation plan needs to be a climate plan, right? So I know the intent is to strengthen those connections and break down those silos, but you could see a scenario where if you're forefronting climate in your discussion or argument within the transportation sector, the response is, well, that discussion is happening in the context of the climate plan, right? So wanting to make sure that that it meets your stated goal in terms of strengthening those connections and linking the different plans. On the benefit side, I definitely hear what you're saying, Elizabeth, in terms of a focus on implementation, and Jen, you mentioned this point, and the need for more specificity and identification of who is going to be responsible for moving a particular policy goal forward. One of the things I really struggle with the regional plan is there's so many great ideas in there, but very few of them does CMAP have any direct control or influence over, right? So if not CMAP, then who is responsible for moving this forward? And in some ways, why are we putting so much work into a particular area if there's not a clear strategy for implementation and progress? It's just language and talking points. It's not a plan, right? So if we see benefit of this structure being able to provide specificity, timelines, accountability, I think that's a real advantage.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Agreed on both points, both the risk and the opportunity.
All right, looks like we got Christina.
I just want to remind folks that this region is the entirety of counties. Will County, approximately half of my county is rural. Approximately a quarter of that is outside of the urban boundary. And as of right now, our regional plan does not address anything for my rural constituents. I know that is the same for other counties in the region, and this is something that we have discussed offline that would be of benefit to the entire region, because we are a region that consists of more than just the urban and suburban areas. And I just want to remind folks of that as we move forward with this next planning effort.
Thank you, Christina. I think for the team putting this work together, farmland preservation and kind of rural strategies are high on our list of things to consider. Another thing I'll point out is that through the process of the climate action plan that Nora was describing, we have to come up with strategies for all sources and sinks of carbon. And so that will also elevate the importance of our natural and, agrarian lands. And through, in their role as absorbers of carbon, it's a different way of thinking, but I think it's also coming to the fore as really, really important. But yeah, we hear you for sure.
All right. I don't see any other hands here. So Elizabeth and Ryan, you're good to go, I think, if you want to continue.
Do we have time? Okay.
I think it's important.
No, sorry.
Yeah.
When I said go, I meant continue.
Oh,
Sorry
gotcha,
about
yeah.
that,
Okay. As Elizabeth mentioned, we do have the federal requirements that do require our metropolitan transportation planning responsibilities to be fulfilled every 4 years. This results in what the feds call a metropolitan transportation plan. Others refer to it as a long-range transportation plan. We've been referring to it as a regional transportation plan, but we're talking about the same thing with all of those terms. And so because of this, the next transportation plan must be adopted by October 2026. So we can't wait for a new vision to be adopted before starting that process. So these are going to be happening kind of alongside each other. But we've already begun efforts to start developing this RTP and scoping it out. So this plan will build on the mobility goals and strategies from Onto 2050 and will guide multimodal transportation decision-making and funding allocations over the plan horizon, which will remain 2050. By initiating the development of the RTP, we are taking proactive steps to ensure compliance with those federal regulations and to address the transportation needs and priorities of the region in a comprehensive and strategic manner. So initial work is underway. We're working to procure consultants, establishing goals, conducting existing conditions research, updating administrative policies and procedures, including updating RSP policies and procedures, and beginning to start planning out our public outreach activities. So on the next slide, you can see there's kind of a high-level take on what this work will include. It's really looking at 3 different questions. What is the transportation system that we want? What are the challenges and opportunities to achieve that system? And what do we actually need to do to achieve that system? And so So those first two buckets are really kind of happening simultaneously. We're already working on starting the existing conditions research. Socioeconomic forecast work is underway. And we're doing the initial work to start thinking about the goals and objectives that will be included in the plan. So I will be back here with this committee often over the coming years as we work to do this. But this is really just kind of a introduction to let you know that this is work underway. And again, look forward to future discussions. I think we could probably skip the discussion questions for now, but if there are any questions, happy to answer them about the RTP.
All right, any final questions for Ryan or Elizabeth? Okay. Looks like we're good. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Elizabeth. Appreciate all the updates. All right, moving on to 5.03. We have a special guest with us today. Dean Mentis with FHWA is online via Zoom. He's going to give us an update on the 11th edition of the MUTCD. Morning, Dean.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, good. I'm going to keep this brief. This is an update on the new manual and uniform traffic control devices. My name is Dean Menchis. I'm with Federal Highway Administration. I'm in our headquarters office in Washington, D.C. In our Office of Operations, I'm on the MUTCD team. I am the tech lead for bicycle facilities. Okay, next slide, please. Quick disclaimer, when it comes to MUTCD questions, oftentimes the details are very important. I'm going to do a very high-level overview of the changes here. If you have questions about a specific intersection or street in your network, we really recommend you find the MUTCD applicable section, read it first, and do that kind of approach. Next slide, please. Okay, there is the link. If you just Google search MUTCD, it'll come up. It's a free document. We have the official MUTCD posted on the internet in a PDF form. You can either look at the entire document or in individual parts. Just kind of a quick snapshot. The MUTCD is over 1,100 pages. It's a very detailed document. Next slide, please. Okay, so as we know, there are over 4 million miles of roadway and over 600,000 bridges in America. And as you're all familiar with, local governments maintain about 78% of all roadway miles in America. This is important because the MUTCD applies to all of these streets and highways and transportation facilities, regardless of funding even. Next slide, please. So real quickly, what is the MUTCD? It's the Manual and Uniform Traffic Control Devices for Streets and Highways. It's the national standard for traffic control devices. So by traffic control devices, we're talking about signs, signals, markings. The MUTCD is the reason why all stop signs in America are red and octagonal and they have the word stop in white letters, because that is in the MUTCD and it's required for any agency that wants to post a stop sign, essentially. And the requirements are open to public travel, and it's regardless of federal funding. So I know we have friends from Illinois Tollway in the room. MUTCD applies to the tollway, even though the tollway does not use any federal funding. It's open to public travel. A couple of important things to keep in mind: the MUTCD is not a roadway design manual. It doesn't dictate many of the decisions that local communities make on land use, access, prioritization of travel modes. The way it works is the local agency decides how many lanes do we want to have on our street? Are we going to include bike lanes or not? Once they make that decision, yes, we're going to have bike lanes, they would go to the MUTCD to see what markings and signs they would use with those bicycle facilities. Next slide, please. Okay, so the MUTCD has been around for almost 100 years. We just published the 11th edition. It's a continually evolving document. It's based on research and engineering experience. It changes with travel patterns and modes, and we do include public input with every update. We just published the 11th edition a couple months ago, so this is brand new information. Click through, do a click, please. What hasn't changed, it's a human-centered standard, and really it's developed with communication in mind with road users. So at the road user's speed and distance, they need a limited amount of information so that they can safely assess the situation and make reactions. And so the MUTCD has evolved to be a document that communicates with road users uniformly. Next slide. Okay, so we published a notice of proposed amendment in late 2020 with a draft MUTCD and opened a public docket to comments. The docket closed May 14th, 2021. We received over 17,000 submissions to the docket with over 100,000 individual comments. So you can see this is a very important document for agencies across America. The draft MUTCD that was published in the NPA was modified to take into account those comments. I can attest to you that every one of those comments was read and considered seriously. And we did publish the new MUTCD December 19th, 2023. 30 days after publication in the Federal Register, it became effective. And the way adoption works is states have up to 2 years to adopt the national MUTCD. It is required that all 50 states adopt it. For Illinois, IDOT is the lead agency. They've indicated to us they intend to take much of the 2 years to update their design manuals, their policies, and they will be publishing a Illinois supplement as well. It's a companion document that contains specific signs and traffic control provisions that are required due to Illinois Vehicle Code. Next slide, please. Okay, so the IAJA also requires going forward in the future that we update the MUTCD every 4 years. So it had been 14 years since the last MUTCD. That resulted in a very big lift for us because there were a lot of changes, obviously. This is a very monumental MUTCD, if you will, just because of the time between the previous edition and this edition. Going forward, we're going to update it every 4 years. We welcome that challenge because that will make it more responsive to evolving trends and hopefully easier on states and practitioners. Next slide, please. Okay, so just some examples of what's in the new MUTCD. We've got a new sign category. You may be familiar with the blue logo signs on the interstate system. We've got a new category for EV charging. We've also got the availability of plaques on lodging, food, and other signs as well. So again, I'm just going to highlight a few changes in the new MUTCD. New MUTCD has a strong focus on vulnerable road users, and that includes bicyclists, pedestrians, those with accessibility needs, access to transit. Next slide, please. I'm the tech lead for the bicycle facilities part. It's part 9 of the MUTCD. This is the part that really changed probably the most in the new MUTCD. It went from 28 pages to 68 pages, so it's over doubled in size. It includes many of the successful experiments that have been done over the last decade or so in areas like Chicago. So you may be familiar with green pavement and bike lanes. Chicago was one of the first areas to experiment with that. Then we had an interim approval. That's now in the new MUTCD. Other bicycle-specific devices, 2-stage turn boxes for easier left turns in urban areas, improved bicyclist visibility with intersection bicycle boxes, buffer separated and separated bike lanes. You can see in the top photo there a separated bike lane, which includes both the markings and the vertical element with those plastic delineators. Bicycle specific signal faces. If you haven't seen them before, that's in the lower left image. That allows the separation of road users in time and space. Bicycles have their own phase of the signal, and we embrace that as part of our safe systems approach of decreasing fatalities for vulnerable road users. This should result in improved safety and comfort for bicyclists. Next slide, please. As far as accessibility, we were developing our MUTCD at the same time that the Access Board was finalizing PROAG. We did coordinate with them. However, we will probably need to do an update once DOT and DOJ formally adopt PROAG. Some of the changes in the MUTCD, we did improve guidance on push button location with proximity to curb ramps. There's better guidance in the work zone section as far as detectable edging for visual disabilities. And we've improved guidance on audible information devices and accessible pedestrian signals. And again, we anticipate we'll probably be doing a revision once PROAG is formally adopted by DOT and DOJ. Next slide, please. You may be familiar with sidewalk extensions. This is a new section in the MUTCD. These are designated by markings and channelization. They've been proven to improve safety for pedestrians by decreasing crossing distance. Great new option for agencies. Next slide, please. And finally, there are new colored pavements. You probably have seen some of these in the Chicago area. Green for bicycle lanes, red for bus only lanes, and purple for electronic toll collection only lanes. We expect these now that they're in the national MUTCD to become more common nationally. Next slide. This is my last slide. Again, you can access the MUTCD for free online. Just Google it or go to that link. It's available as a PDF, and actually the federal law that incorporates the MUTCD into federal law specifies that the online MUTCD is the official MUTCD. And again, IDOT is in the process of looking at these changes. They'll be updating their design manuals, their policies, and they'll be publishing an Illinois supplement. And so we're kind of in that initial period where the MUTCD is new and the states are taking a look at it. So that's a real quick overview. I'm available for questions if there are any.
All right. Thanks, Dean. That's a lot of good information, and definitely everyone is looking forward to it and appreciate all the effort. Hopefully you guys can catch your breath before the next update here in 3 or 4 years. Any questions, comments for Dean? All right. We got none. I guess that's it, Dean. Appreciate it. Have a good weekend.
Thanks.
All right, moving on to item 6, other business. Do we have any other business that committee members would like to bring forward? Don't see any. I just want to make a quick note. Looking at the agenda, you might see that the header for legislative updates is no longer there. The thought there is that the legislative team, if there's anything major, significant they're tracking, that they'll jump on and put an item on the agenda. More than welcome to bring stuff up. They are here and available if we have any questions like that. So you just may not see it specifically called out in future agendas unless there's anything major. So just a note there. Item 7, public comment. Does anyone from the audience wish to address the committee today? I don't see anybody, Terry? Nope. Anyone online, Kama?
Yes, we've got Garland Armstrong online. Go ahead and unmute Garland.
Hi, everyone. It's Garland Armstrong, formerly of Des Plaines, now living in Des Moines. How y'all doing?
Good, Garland.
All right. Just want y'all to know last Friday I turned 58 years old, and just want you to know I'm still celebrating my birthday this month. So I turned 58 last Friday and had a blast. So, and also too, I just want the progress of what I said previously before about like if there was the fire, the unthinkable, if it happens on the Metro PCTA, and I would like to know the progress of it so far, and if y'all starting the training on it, if the unthinkable happens, and what about for those who cannot speak clear English, needs to translate it if they are riders on there or passengers on there, and the unthinkable happens, including paratransit too. If their clients on there and the unthinkable happens, are they extremely well prepared for it, and how they get communication to make sure at which location and where the fire department will be right there on the spot if the unthinkable happens. So I need an update on it, and if there's any questions or comments from y'all concerning about that. And then also too, for the climate, I just heard maybe then for the people with disabilities in the disability community, they need to make sure to be well aware of it. So I hope someone can help them out with that. And also for those who cannot speak clear English, how to translate for them in their language, how to be well prepared for the climate changes. So I'll be glad to answer any questions or comments from the chairs or the committees there if you have any suggestions or what.
All right, thank you, Garland. Let me see anyone. I don't see anyone that has anything to answer. Just on the climate stuff, I think the big thing will just be to follow, continuing on with that on the climate committee. There's gonna be a lot of, it's just at the early stages, there'll be a lot coming up there and some opportunities to provide some good feedback. I can't talk today, Garland, sorry, to that climate team there. So I think that'd be the appropriate channel there if you have questions.
Yeah, because they certainly make sure that the disability community is going to be extremely well prepared if the unthinkable happens down the road, because we don't know, God forbid, only time will tell if it does. Are they extremely well prepared for it or not?
Okay. Yeah, we'll keep tabs on that, Garland. Thanks for the comment.
Okay.
And happy birthday, by the way. You should definitely have a birthday month. I guarantee, I agree with you there.
Yep, I certainly will, and make sure I'm using up all the restaurant purse I can, so it doesn't go to waste.
Thank you, Garland. Appreciate it.
All right.
Anyone else, Kama, online?
We have one comment in the chat. It says, given the discussion around the interstates and reducing VMT, as well as all the negative externalities regarding urban highways, including PM 2.5, economics of sprawl, and adverse health outcomes, what consideration has been given to removal of urban highways?
All right, we'll get that comment down and duly noted. Any other comments? Great. Moving on, item 8.0, next meeting is scheduled for April 26th of 2024. Seeing no other business before the committee, do I have a motion to adjourn? Jack, motion, any second? Jackie, we'll get your hand up first there. All in favor? Any opposed to adjourning? Awesome. Have a good weekend, everyone.